The artistic phenomenon that dazzled the world at the end of the 19th century is something we take pretty much for granted today. Parisian commuters enter and exit metro stations without giving much thought to the designs of Hector Guimard. The glass roof of the house Otto Wagner designed for himself on the Graben, a pedestrian precinct in Vienna, isn't much of a distraction for the Viennese setting out for a late afternoon stroll. And shoppers on a wet Chicago afternoon are more interested in getting out of the rain than into the philosophy embedded in Louis Sullivan's cast iron decorations at the corner of State Street and Madison. Art Nouveau is no longer the new art. It's part of the urban landscape. Things were very different 100 years ago. In the 1900s, Art Nouveau was a very modern style, deliberately seeking to create an alternative to the prevailing tastes of the late 19th century.
Art Nouveau is the first self-consciously modern style. It emerges at the end of the 19th century, and the reason that it's the first self-consciously modern style is because the world is transforming at an incredibly rapid rate. We've had the beginnings of an industrial revolution a couple of generations before, and this was the great age of the urban revolution, in which millions of people started to flood into cities, and cities started to grow out of all proportion.
Those teeming cities were the breeding ground for Art Nouveau. The times were supercharged, and artists received and transmitted ideas faster than ever. The makers of the new art were young to be major artists, but the right age to be revolutionaries. Charles Rennie Mackintosh was 28 when he completed designs for the Glasgow School of Art, begun in 1896. At the same age, Will Bradley was one of America's leading graphic designers. Gustav Klimt and his colleagues were in their late 20s and early 30s when they broke away from the Viennese establishment and formed the secessionist movement. Art Nouveau came in many shapes and styles. Victor Horta designed 3-story houses, door handles, even door knockers in a free-flowing, curvilinear style inspired by nature. Joseph Hoffmann designed tea services as he designed the Palais Stocklet, in a pared-down, rectilinear, almost abstracted geometric design. What they had in common was an emphasis on the elegant use of line in architecture and design. Art Nouveau had almost as many names as it did styles. It was called Jugendstil, or youth style in Germany, secessionist in Austria, and floral style in Italy. For a while, it was nicknamed Style Métro, after the new Paris metro stations. Siegfried Bing's Paris Gallery gave it the name that stuck. Bing also used the name for his pavilion at the Paris World's Fair in 1900. The fair was a hothouse for new ideas. René Lalique displayed his jewelry against a balustrade of winged female figures that dazzled visitors. Thomas Edison sent a crew to Paris to film the fair and documented the new wave of modernity. From the elevator of the Eiffel Tower, built 11 years earlier, Edison's camera could show the fair's size, but it couldn't capture the excitement. Moving sidewalks took people around the perimeter of the fairgrounds. Powerboats motored along the Seine, providing views of riverside exposition buildings. There were entertainments, too. The American dancer Loie Fuller had her own pavilion, a static tribute to her free-flowing shapes designed by Henri Sauvage. 100 years ago, the new art and its makers were controversial. One critic quipped that Art Nouveau was used by parents to frighten naughty children. Another complained that metal is being twisted in weird and unnatural ways, and banisters are twisted into ingenious knots that threaten you as you ascend. The artists were used to criticism. Art Nouveau began as a profound critique of the past. Art Nouveau had its origins in a mid-19th century revolt against the ravages of industrialization. Artists and intellectuals in England, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, were appalled by the misery they saw around them. The English critic John Ruskin decried the insanity of avarice that reduced people to machines and the mechanical processes that produced crude and degraded objects. English artists responded to that criticism. William Morris argued for a return to the philosophical and visual integrity of the Middle Ages. Morris railed against what he saw as the suffocating clutter of late 19th century taste. The unrelated objects and conflicting historical styles of this London drawing room seemed to be a visual metaphor for the fragmentation of society and its cultural values. Morris founded a company in 1861 to create works like this curtain designed to reflect his philosophy. Artists like Edward Burne-Jones romanticized the Middle Ages in this stained glass window he designed for Morris and Company. Walter Crane designed wallpaper that could be replicated and sold to grace the homes of a new and growing middle class. The stage was set for Art Nouveau, a new and ambitious art that sought to improve society by extending its reach into every corner of human life. Art Nouveau was driven by ideas, but it was also driven by new materials and processes. Émile Gallet was a designer from the eastern French city of Nancy who expressed many of his ideas about nature in glassware. He used new techniques in acid etching and state-of-the-art high-temperature furnaces. Louis Comfort Tiffany's lustrous, iridescent lava bowl was made possible by new metallic finishes. Architecture also benefited from new techniques. Victor Horta used cast iron for decorative purposes in the houses he designed in Brussels. Horta's answer to Belgium's damp climate was to trap the available light in a cage of cast iron and glass, windows and mirrors on the top story that would release the light into the house. Wrought iron provided the curvilinear decorations. The design sprang from Horta's artistic vision of a flowing organic line, but that design also celebrated the materials themselves.
He really appreciated the use of iron and cast iron and also glass. Of course, iron and cast iron had been used before in America, but it was always hidden by masonry. It was concealed as if it was something to be ashamed of. Here, on the contrary, Horta used cast iron not only as a structure, but also as a decoration.
In Chicago, the blank canvas created by the devastating fire that leveled the city in 1871 created challenges for architects. The use of structural iron in multi-story buildings was banned. It cracked and collapsed in the extreme heat of the Chicago fire. Louis Sullivan responded with imagination to those challenges. The use of stronger, high-carbon steel and the invention of the passenger elevator meant buildings like Sullivan's Carson Peary Scott department store, begun in 1894, could rise higher than ever before. The elevator gave Sullivan a chance to explore the decorative possibilities of cast iron grills. The new role for the arts and steady stream of new ways to express it was an international phenomenon. In Paris, Hector Guimard seized on the sculptural possibilities of glass and cast iron and put them to the service of the people in his designs for the metro stations. The use of art and design to improve the urban landscape led many artists who had trained as painters, like Théophile Steinlen and Thomas Heine, to explore the new medium of the poster. Breakthroughs in color lithography made posters a cheap way to enliven the face of the European city.